Why is he called C? Everyone's like, why does Bond out of nowhere say, I think I'll call you C?
I know what it stands for.
So why does he do that?
Every American is like this. They're like, does that mean Let me lay out the scene. Bond is meeting C for the first time, and it's, this guy just got promoted. He's now your boss. And Bond's like, that's great. We should call you C now.
Suppose we should call you C now.
But up until then, there is no C word for the audience to attach to, where it's like, oh, is he the captain of something? No. Is he the chief of something? No. They just say he's
the head of the Joint Security Service.
And then out of nowhere, Bond's like, oh, we should call you C. And the audience goes, wait, what? Did I miss something? I was in the bathroom. What happened? And he's like, no, you don't need to call me C. And Bond's like, no, bitch. I'm going to call you C.
Suppose we should call you C now.
No, Max, please.
No, I think I'll call you C.
Because you're a c***. But he doesn't say that last part, but all of our brains go, what is C, what is C, what is C? He must mean c***. What else could that mean? Why did Bond turn it into an insult out of nowhere? It has to mean something bad. What's a bad C word? See you next Tuesday. Done. But then you're like, you rewind the tape. You're like, but what was C? Where did C originate? Bond just makes it up on the spot, and I don't get it, and I've never gotten it. And even if I Google it, Google can't tell me. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what C means other than c***.
They do. It's out there.
Please tell me.
I will clarify what C means for you.
By the way, somebody in the Discord, I'm sorry, I've had so many boozes. I can't remember who in the Discord said, because I asked the Discord, I was like, guys, why is he named C? And somebody was like, well, obviously because he heads up the bullshit C plot. That's like, that's funny. That's funny.
Okay, so C is the sign letter. This is your code name, a sign letter given to the chief of the Security Intelligence Service, which is AKA, that is MI6. Not necessarily for chief, but because Captain Sir Mansfield Smith Cummings, the first chief of Secret Intelligence Service, would sign his name with a green C on all of his documents. So it became a tradition.
What if that guy's name was Cuntings?
And you can look this up. If you look up who's the chief officer of Secret Intelligence Service, on the bio in Wikipedia, it'll say C under the current person. So it is a thing in Britain that that person is dignified under C. Now, let me go further. With this, right? Fleming, let's go back to our boy Ian Fleming. Fleming used M instead of C for his code naming of the characters, possibly because there's actually a couple of reasons maybe he did this, but some people believe it's because he knew Maxwell Knight. Now, Maxwell Knight wasn't the head of MI6, but he was the head of MI5, and they were good friends. They knew each other. And so, like Cummings, which is Mansfield's last name, he did the same thing, but had the document signed with an M in recognition of that. And I believe if you go into the books, I think his name's Miles, but I think his last name's M or something like that, as far as the M in the books, right?
Okay.
Now, part of it is, as far as the fandom goes, I think we even, to the beginning of this podcast, we were under the assumption that M is the head of MI6.
Since I've been head of MI7, there's been a 40% drop in 00 operative casualties.
This movie kind of makes the point that it's like, you're not the head of MI6, you're the head of the 00 division. I don't know if the movies prior to this really made that distinction, but then we also have to remember, like, the earlier films didn't refer to it as MI6, just referred to it as Universal Exports as the code name for the intelligence service in James Bond.
James Bond, Universal Exports.
At least this whole bit is, I think, a little more clever than it is on its face, because, of course, if you don't understand what C is, you're like, what? But the clever part of it is, and this is what I think the writers were intending, was that Bond is a man of tradition. He is old ways best from Skyfall, right? So he's going to go with, this is the protocol. We always call the head of the intelligence service, we call him by the code name. You're C. So I'm going to call you C. And the other guy's like, no, I don't believe in this tradition bullshit. I am trying to take spycraft out of MI6. Like, that is my whole mission, essentially, on face value before we realize more about him. But he's just like, yeah, I don't believe in that stuff. That's silly. I'm not going to do that. And James Bond immediately is like, oh, you're a c***. I think I'll call you C. So
yeah,
it is like, he's like, he believes in tradition. The other guy doesn't believe in tradition. And eventually he's kind of calling him a c*** anyway. I think that part's brilliant. However, to your point, the movie never clarifies. And also, if you rewatch the scene, he doesn't say chief, which is what some people would think the C means, but that's not really what it is. But at least chief would have lead you to being like, oh, chief, C, I get that. But instead he says head. And if he had said chief, I think it would have made a clarification that he was indeed a.
And now we know what C stands for.
For us Americans who don't know the inner workings of MI5, MI6, whatever it is, especially because these have always been American-made films. They're about a guy in Britain. They're about Britain itself, but they've always been American-made. Going back to the beginning,
but it's always a British-American production.
But Harry Saltzman,
that's my point to it.
Harry Saltzman
is an American, yes,
and Cubby Broccoli were two Americans who took control of this British property. And so my point is that they've always been. Why is it that anybody gets famous? You know, the Beatles were famous in Britain, and and then you go to the United States, and that's where you enter the world stage. You have to prove yourself here because we're the, until we're taken over by Spectre in Russia and China. You have to make it in the United States to be a big thing. That's just me stating a fact.
As far as showbiz, as far as entertainment and showbiz, I mean, even like 2 minutes ago, I just said nobody knew who Christoph Waltz was until he did Quentin Tarantino's film.
Exactly.
Nobody knew who he was. All of a sudden, Americans knew. Everybody knew who he was.
That being the case, you have to spell out what C means. And if it was, like you said, if they just said chief, that would be enough to go, oh, C. And then when Bond... So what you just laid out is brilliant. I didn't know that. Honestly, it's no different than the first emperor of Rome is Caesar. And then from then on, the emperor is known as Caesar. That just happened to be the name of the first guy who held the position, but then everybody after that, Caesar became synonymous with emperor because that was the first guy. Same concept. C becomes the head of this thing. But without any context, you're like, you don't get what you just said. And the brilliant part is that it's Bond being a traditionalist and Max Denby coming in and being a progressive and shaking things up. That is lost to me, and I would respect that scene if it was a little more clear as to why Bond immediately says C, regardless of chief or whatever. Then the context, the subtext of the scene would have come to light, and I would like that scene more, but it's lost, and that is definitively sloppy, unfortunately.
I will ask this of the audience. If you're from the UK or from Britain, does that scene make sense to you when you watched it the first time?
Neil Jackson.
I want to know that because
Neil,
we were
need
talking
you to
about
in.
it. We need somebody.
What's your opinion?
We need someone.
That's
we need a
common
Brit to
knowledge.
weigh in.
Everybody knows about C. He's like
that's
George
what I need to know.
Washington.
Right. That's what I need to know because it is that is confusing. I still think that is clever. I think that whole thing is actually pretty clever.
The intention is brilliant, but the execution is piss poor, which is what this whole movie is.